to item M5, Local Control Accountability Plan, Stakeholder Engagement and Process Update.
Yeah, so this is actually the perfect segue into that conversation that Trustee Dice, that Trustee Affelt was just speaking about. I have Director of Educational Services, Anna Allen, here tonight to give the board and the community an overview of our RTI process and also give the board an update on the work that's going on at the Emery Secondary School and Annie Yates in that regard. Ms. Allen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
11 o'clock. So basically, on the agenda is the LCAP first, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with that, and I just want to remind everyone this is an update. So the updates that will come before you will be updates in terms of the work that we've done to date. So I know sometimes there's expectation like this is the plan and the complete rollout, but it's always an update in terms of where we are now, and then we can, at the end, we'll talk about like what are some of the next steps. So therefore, there's a next update for you all. So the local control funding, in terms of this gives us an opportunity to develop our story, and I think this is what Member Simon talked about and described at our last school board meeting. But it'll allow all stakeholders. Will provide input into how the new funding will be spent to improve educational conditions for our children. Stakeholders include the collective voices of teachers, parents, students, administrators, and community members. And we have opportunities to modify and align current plans demonstrating the principles of community schools within the Emeryville Center of Community Life, which was very helpful in terms of you all defining a vision, because we can use that when we conduct community meetings or when we speak to parents, when we speak to teachers, etc. So you all are familiar with the state priorities, and I just listed that again. State priorities is making sure that we have teachers who are credentialed and are well qualified to teach our students. Pupil outcomes, parental involvement, pupil achievement, I can't stand the word pupil, but student achievement, student engagement, school climate, adoption of our state standards, and course of study, just to ensure that we're providing students A through G courses. So what I'll talk about is some of the established stakeholder meetings, when they occur, and the groups that actually are part of those meetings. So currently we have our staff meetings, and so our staff meetings occur at Annie Yates the first Thursday of the month at 1:45 p.m. and at Emery Secondary the first Wednesday of the month at 2:20 p.m. And so the last Emery Secondary meeting, Mark Bonet was able to just give information about LCFF, what that entails, and how that relates to the LCAP engagement process. And then he'll do the same for Annie Yates on the 19th because he was out of town this past Thursday. So our goal is that every staff meeting to give an update in terms of where the process are, in terms of LCFF funding, any information that we receive, we will pass that on to the staff. So the last meeting that Dora and I attended, I think last Thursday, was the California School Services, I believe. The analogy was given that in terms of the whole LCFF and LCAP, it's like flying a plane while you're building it. So this is the reason why. So there's so many meetings that are happening that I attend, Dora attends, Mark attends, or Deborah attends, because the information is constantly changing. So sometimes we want a solid answer, and when we think we have a solid answer, something else comes up. So I think to keep in mind as we transition through this year that the state is moving out of its old ways into the new ways, but we still have to produce for the old ways. So anything that has to do with categorical funding, as Mark, I think he talked about that. But as they transition into that, we still have to provide the information for the old categorical funding until the new template and new requirements come out for LCFF. So particularly at our staff meetings, this is where we really want to inform our staff, because they are also able then to explain some of that to their parents when parents have questions. So it's very critical for us to update them every month. Another meeting that we have is the District English Advisory Council, and so I do have the dates that were published were Ms. Miller had published the wrong date, so they actually occur on Fridays. And so it is January 17th is the next one, March 14th is the next one, and then May 16th. So all of those occur from 8:30 to 9:30 at Annie Yates, and those meetings have their parents and staff of English learners. So they're our parents, and they're also our staff who teach our English learners. So at those meetings, our goal is to update it as well as begin to receive feedback from stakeholders.
So they're there from 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m.?
That is correct.
PM.
Because most of them, that's when we.
It's AM,
Did I say
9:30
PM?
AM.
What did I put
Yeah,
down?
PM, yeah.
Oh, man, no, 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
that's a long
Yes,
day.
no, that would be a long meeting, right? So I'm sorry, but it's 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
Okay.
And so it occurs at Annie Yates on those Fridays. The school site council, so it's been a struggle to get those up and running, but the dates that we have are Annie Yates. It'll be the second Monday of the month at 5:30, and then Emery Secondary the third Wednesday of the month at 4:30 p.m.
I thought it was 5 o'clock for the Annie Yates.
I think we're trying to do 5:30 to accommodate one of our other parents, or some other parents who may get off of work at 5 o'clock. Because right now, although we have 2 parents, our anticipation is that we hope to have more parents. So I'm hoping that, so there was that question of whether it be 5 or 5:30, but I think with the 2 parents that we do have, 5:30 was a balance for both of them.
And while you're on that topic,
Yeah.
that was one of my notes. I think, to be honest, if you really want strong participation, you probably need to make that 6:30. To give parents really a chance to come, get off of work, to get here, even if they may have to stop at home for a minute, but to get here and be, in the mind frame of really participating. Because even if an individual gets off at 5, to get here at 5:30, I mean, you have to work in Oakland to get here.
Yeah, and I while I agree with you, I mean, so remember, the school site council is not just parents, it's staff also.
Right,
And so
I
the
know.
staff that's not being paid, they volunteer.
I know.
So so this is where the compromise comes.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. That's why it's always been challenging. If you have it very late, you have your parents that are there, and that's maybe. You have your parents that are there, but you don't have the staff that are there as well, with the exception of your principal. At the high school, you have to have your students have to be a part of it, which is why you see the times actually maybe earlier. And it doesn't mean that's, and so in this case, this particular case, it may actually change based on the group composition and what the group decides. So this is this is the established time at the moment. So it could possibly change, and the goal is to try to accommodate everyone who must participate on the school site council.
Because to be honest, that was my comment, basically on the presentation, looking at the meeting schedule, is that for the community, 5:30 is real early, and it's very difficult to get there.
It is.
Yeah.
And so some of the teachers state that they feel like they're at work for 12, 14 hours. And because it's volunteer, they have to volunteer for it. And students who are required to be on the school site council at the high school, they have to be on it. So the goal is to try to compromise. Now, what has occurred, what has been discussed, is to actually have, and I've looked at the bylaws for school site councils. I want to call our State Department just to make sure. What has been discussed is to have some quarterly meetings, to have them on Saturdays, where it's a longer extended period of time, maybe like a 9 to 2,
Right.
because then it can accommodate everyone's time, and they feel relaxed. They're not rushed off of work. They're not tired from work,
Yeah.
being at work all day. They're not tired from being at school all day. So I just need to make that phone call. So currently that's the time holder, but it's not. It is subject to change, which is why I think at the end I need to make sure that we I'm able to state these are the times so parents and community members know when these meetings are happening, but I know those are some of the concerns that come up.
You're right, because my concern with this whole plan is that we get the community involved.
Exactly,
You
which
know.
is why school site council is only one part of it.
Right, I know,
And
I
so,
know.
so what I don't want to do is, when you still look at school site council, the school site council is still, the composition is still based off the old
Right,
rules.
because that's federal money.
That's right, it's federal money. So
That's right.
technically, the school site council really only addresses federal money.
Exactly.
They don't even address everything else. That's just one place
Right.
to receive input for the LCAP.
Right.
That is not our intent to be the place,
No,
and it's not our intent to be the primary place.
Right.
So, but everything that you're stating, it's been trial and error. There have been times when we've had meetings at 6:30 p.m., and particularly when I was the principal at the high school, and it's myself and 2 of our staff members who are sitting with one another, and no one has shown up. Or it's been opposite. It may be, at NEH, it may be more parents who will show up when I've been principal there, and it's hard for the staff to stay. They'll stay like 15 minutes and they leave. And you try to get a cross-section of staff, but many of them, you don't want to use the same ones who always volunteer and then they burn out. You know, so just know that's not the school site council will function in its primary role, but that is not the primary place for the LCAP. However, it is an opportunity for them to give input, and their role is to actually monitor the single plan for student achievement. And I'll talk about the plans towards the end in terms of some of the next steps and how to align those.
Which is supposed to align with the LCAP.
Exactly, and I'll talk about that at the end. When I talk about a scope and sequence and looking at increased services and how those plans need to come together. The parent-teacher organization at NEH is the second Tuesday of the month at 5:30, and in Emery Secondary, the third Wednesday of the month at 5:30. So the stakeholder groups will be parents, teachers, and staff, and again, we know that they may not be well attended, but we're trying to hit the places where they're established, as well as create some new opportunities for community members to receive input. So we also have a budget advisory committee, which is determined at each, well, prior to that, it was determined by each, at each BAC meeting by the committee members. And that was because it was primarily staff. So when we met, we would state when is the next time we want to meet, and we would make the date. However, to have parents to be involved, because every meeting except for that I've talked about, except for the staff meeting, are all public meetings. So it should be a place where the public can at least come in here, even if they can't vote or they can't really, they could engage, but if they're not committee members and who can vote, but it's still a public meeting. So we actually want to establish some times where we can post it, publicize it, so if parents wanted to come to a budget advisory committee meeting and see how it works, it's transparent and they're able to observe that.
The BAC, is that, you know, I don't know how formal those are. Is it just, you know, whoever comes shows up and, you know, it tends to often be some of the same folks?
No, it is Mark creates an agenda. He sends out
are there formal members that it's
There are.
Carol Belf and this parent and that?
Well, last year we wanted parents, and so there were parents who were actually nominated and actually, I think, committed, but they never showed up. So there were a few parents from each school site, they just never appeared. But the same committee, the same people who were on the committee as members, we all met throughout the year. And it was the same group of people from Annie. It was a combination of district, Annie Yates, and Emery Secondary School members.
And so maybe this is a point you were just making. You'll invite other people to come and observe, but they're not sitting at the table as the committee member.
Exactly. So once we start to establish, and I think when that happens, we want to be conscious of a group who's actually there to provide, in terms of when we set the purpose of the budget advisory committee, someone who has information, and they're actually a lot of times will state what our next steps are, and we'll bring back information, versus someone who just wants to come for one time and state what they don't like or what they don't want, and we'll receive the input or we'll hear what they have to state. But if they're not, we basically wanted a budget advisory committee meeting worker bees, people who will actually work and people who will actually think about what it takes to either make cuts, increase, if you give up this service, what does it mean to gain this service, and to have that thoughtful conversation in a series of conversations versus just a one-time shot.
So,
but it is a public.
I'd like us to think about having a student sit on there from, you know, the Youth Together class that's trying to learn, you know, student leadership, that brought us our school board student member, and see if they, you know, want to step up and fill that position.
Yes.
Have we had a student on there before?
We don't have. This last year was the first time, at least in terms of Mr. Bonet facilitating it. However, that is one area we can have students participate.
Yeah. But also, as you said, that it's an important, informed entity into the LCAP, but it's not the, you know, the sole or primary advisory
No,
body
it is not.
either. Yeah.
No, but the budget advisory committee it's not the sole, but it's one. I would say in this case, their purpose is to give some direction on the budget.
It's a key recommending
It is,
body.
because you have, at that,
Providing input.
this is the body where you have a significant amount of teachers who want to give voice in terms of what happens in the budget. So I would say that is a key group, just as the Parent Advisory Committee would be. So the Parent Advisory Committee is completely full of parents. In this case, the Budget Advisory Committee happens to be primarily staff who are a large percentage of our stakeholders.
And
in terms
budget
of,
managers.
budget.
And budget managers, too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the statute doesn't require that there be a budget advisory committee.
It does not.
It certainly
However,
lets
I
us have one. It does require there be a parent advisory committee and that we hear their feedback from them.
So, yes, so I mean, you can either hear your feedback from your teachers at a meeting during public comment, or we can have it as a structured format, because you're going to hear them. It's not, and you are correct, it's not required. However, from what I hear from the board, or at least in the essence terms of LCAP, the goal is to be a transparent process and to make sure that you hear all of your stakeholders. So whether it be a primary group that has teachers on it, or a primary group with parents, or a primary group with students, my assumption would be that we want to hear all voices. So therefore, no one can necessarily come up and state, well, you hand-selected those parents.
Right.
And because you hand-selected those parents, we never had a say, and we are the people who actually are implementing those programs. So I think we want to make it as transparent, but it's not exclusive to teachers. It is a public meeting, and our goal is to have parents on those meetings, but in the event is to actually plug in as many stakeholders as we can in established groups that we already have.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree, we want to absolutely know what the teachers have, and we don't want them to similarly come back and say, well, I wasn't on the Budget Advisory Committee, I don't agree with that. So hopefully it's a representative, sense of what the teachers want. But I guess what I'm hoping is that we are, and you're going to get to it, but that we're also informing the Parent Advisory Committee or panel, or the same kind of budget information that the BAC gets, so that they can make informed choices and decisions.
Well, I would hope so. We want them to make an informed recommendation, or also make an
Because
informed...
I think of
Yes.
that Parent Advisory Panel as it's required by statute, is they probably are going to be able to think more thoughtfully and give us better feedback than we're necessarily going to get with a broad public forum, which we're also going to do, and that's going to be great too, and invite everyone and everyone. But so I just want to make sure we're giving that Parent Advisory Panel enough information that they can also kind of have that conversation. And maybe, I'm just throwing this out because I hadn't even thought of this before, to save Mr. Benet's time, you somehow want to combine some of those efforts where he's doing the informing at the same time to the people who come and they're on the Parent Advisory Panel, and then these people are on the Budget Advisory Committee, and they can go off on their own and talk, or they can have the conversation. I don't know. There are different ways to do it. I want to be efficient about it, and suggest you guys give that some thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. The next meeting are the all-student body meetings, which occur at Annie Yates Tuesdays after school, and those students are primarily our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And then in Emery Secondary School, they happen Tuesday mornings, and actually, they happen Tuesday mornings. So those are, I put elected parents, but that's not true. That stakeholder group are just all elected students. So it gives the students an opportunity to have their own forum to actually meet and have some input in terms of the LCAP. And so Youth Together, all the students who are part of Youth Together are also on the all-student body. And then we'll have other staff meetings as determined, instructional leadership team, or RTI collaborative, special education team, wellness, in terms of WASP, because those are some places where the specific increased services will occur in terms of plans, because these are the people who actually implement or create some of those plans as directed. And then some scheduled meetings that are specific to developing, the LCAP, our community forums. So we have 3 Saturday forums. one at Emery Secondary School, one at Annie Yates, and then a Saturday forum at the district office. Doesn't mean that these are the only 3. These are 3 that we've scheduled, and those will be in collaboration with Youth Together. So they have had experience in hosting some community forums in San Francisco Unified School District, also West Contra Costa, and I think a few at some sites in Oakland Unified. So we'll use some of their the format to actually host some of the community forums, so we can get a cross-section of just people who may want to give input and turn into the plan. The other part is to do student forums, although we have a student body, an all-student body. Our student forums are to be determined, but we want to have student focus groups, so again, so they feel like their voices are heard. And then our Parent Advisory Council, once that is established, when that'll be to be determined, which will be held on a consistent and regular basis, but will be a formal process as well in terms of an agenda, providing information, having a discussion on the information, and actually receiving, as the parent advisory, receiving input from the other stakeholders so they can have a more informative, because it's not just the budget, but they need to know what other stakeholders are thinking. Otherwise, the information may come just from one perspective versus how as we as parents can think about it from multiple perspectives and to give input.
When do we have to have that advisory council together?
So we're trying to do that as soon as possible. I don't think there's necessarily a date, because when I do look at some of the information in terms of timetables, there are some that are just timetables that I've looked at some other districts. They're meeting maybe like twice, and it's really to give input. And so to me, that's the same cycle as just please rubber stamp our plan, and it's not really being meaningful and having any dialogue. So our goal is to try to establish a more like a budget advisory council where there's an agenda, but not so formal that there's no conversation that happens.
Yeah, I had the same question, and you're right, it's not sort of required in the statute, and you could do it, as you said, in a very minimal way that's not very meaningful. I would suggest we try to get that, and you had in your prior version a specific date of early January for trying to put that together. I would like to see us stick to that so that those folks can get a little bit up and running on what does our district budget look like now? What is this LCAP, LCFF thing that we're supposed to do? So that by the time you get to that forum, on January 15th and February 11th, that these folks can be very active stakeholders.
Yeah, so the to be determined here is just when their meetings will occur. So again, it should be a public meeting, even though there may be a parent advisory group, but it should be a public meeting that anyone can attend to hear how they think and what their thinking process is. So it should be transparent just like any of our other meetings. And it doesn't feel like there's a hand-selected group of parents. Some of the blogs and some of the articles that I read or editorials regarding this process is that it has felt in some districts like it is a hand-selected process, and we don't want that to occur here. So it's
So how are you going to select these participants?
So some of it will be nominations. Some of it will be nominations. Some of it we'll recruit. We'll put out mass, mailings and ask. And for the most part, the more the merrier. If we receive 15, then 15 is great. If we receive 10, we'll work with 10. If we receive 20, we'll work with 20. But it won't also because then if you work with a smaller group, you just do what you do. Your methodology in terms of how you actually conduct the meeting. You don't conduct it in a large group and you have one large meeting and you have 20 people talking. You would split up in groups. You have partner chats. You have small group chats. You bring it back. You write down their information, etc. So it really depends on the group in terms of how you actually facilitate the meeting. And so our goal is just to make it available to everyone, but we'll do some individual calling. I think there may be at the end there's a role. I think you presented something or you sent something out like it must have been Berkeley, the Berkeley Board of Trustees, what they do. But sometimes some parents they're kind of interested, but sometimes they just need a personal invitation and they need a phone call or they need an email, and they'll definitely step up to the plate. So So it's a wide variety of everyone being able to nominate parents, but also to open it up for parents who want to come. But the key is that you have to be dedicated and you need to attend all of the meetings. It's not just a one-time community
Yeah.
forum.
So
You must be
is that
dedicated.
going to go out in the Wednesday packet, that invitation in January?
Yes, so that in our website, robocall, and we'll try, and we'll place it, what was another way? I forgot. Oh, but personal phone calls, actually, also, personal phone calls. For some of those that either staff or other parents themselves have felt that they feel like they want to be committed to this advisory group.
Yeah, and I guess in those communications, it would be good to give parents an idea of what the commitment is. So, it's not a ton of stuff. You're not
Exactly.
tying your hands for, every Saturday the next 6 months, but it's also, how many meetings are you anticipating, and, some of these community forums, and that, their role will be to, review the LCAP, provide written comments to the superintendent, and, to which the superintendent has to respond in writing, and, just sort of a kind of paragraph on what this thing is.
It is. So
How
speaking to
much
Celeste from
time
Youth
it's-
Together, our goal is actually to make it even more user-friendly. The first time I used LCAP with parents, they said, speak English.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't understand what that means. And when I stated we have a lot of money that will come in and you have an opportunity to say what will happen to it, and they were like, okay, I can understand that.
Yeah.
So we're actually going to, and it may be in a survey type, like what time can you be committed? Is it an evening or would it be on a Saturday? Or, and would you be interested in sitting on an advisory committee for the next 4 or 5 sessions, or once a month or twice a month? So as the information goes out, we'll still receive information in, hopefully. But that's our goal, for sure. And then I think also, if time permits, having some parent focus groups, like maybe calling parents who are really interested in athletics, or calling parents who are interested in some of the quote-unquote subgroups that are described in the LCAP process. So or parents of special needs students, but just to have some focus groups, because sometimes they have a lot to say, and we want to make sure their voices are heard as well. So the engagement processes in November, December is to provide information, recruitment of parents, to confirm all established meeting times by the 20th before we go to break, and to determine methodologies, outcomes, and purpose of meetings. So when we state what those meetings are, they understand what the purpose is. Some meetings are just straight forums and informational. Some meetings will have a complete, like, small group engagement, come back and share out a jigsaw sort of, type of format. And then some methodologies are, particularly some of the established groups, is more of a cycle of inquiry. You look at data, you see what your needs assessment are, you go back, the group goes back and they may modify or set a goal, you come back with more data, and you kind of see what your process is in growth. And that's particularly what you do normally at a school site council or at your ELAC, your DLAC meetings, is that you usually look at a set of data, and then your goal is to gather more data and set goals, and so you go through a cycle of inquiry. In January is to provide information and build understanding, so really understanding what LCFF is, what is LCAP, et cetera. Receive input, information gathering, continually conducting a needs assessment for data, and developing and modifying plans. So while we may not have the template yet, we can definitely start writing down what those thoughts are and trying to establish some of those plans to align with plans that we currently have. In February, again, provide information, build understanding, some of the same information, but then start to try to align our plans. In March, receive input, feedback, and consultation. So start to think about an actual consultation in terms of what should really happen, which means we can't do everything, and you have to think about what are some of the gives and takes, but to receive some consultation for that versus just more of a, we would like to have this, we want more of this, we want more of that at this school, more of this for this grade level, but actually, okay, this is what we want, what gives us high leverage in terms of community schools, our guiding principles, and what are our strategic plan. So it has to be focused somewhere. And then in April, receive feedback and consultation, again modifying the LCAP. By then, we should have the template for sure, by March. And then May and June, receive feedback and consultation for parent advisory, finalizing the LCAP public hearing. So in May and June is more of the public school board meetings where you start to hear at a school board meeting the parent advisory, the consultation. So it'll give the Dr. Lindo an opportunity to hear what people are saying so she can respond appropriately in a timely manner. Correct? And then so from School Services of California, this is navigating new conversations. So the old rules, we talked about how much money is in categorical programs, what are we allowed to use it for, how do we comply with state law, and what are the audit requirements and penalties, which typically is sometimes can be very boring. What do our professional teachers, administrators, and classified staff advise? How will we measure success? What alternative programs get a no in order to give this one a yes? So there will be give and take. Because we can't do everything, but what gives us the most leverage based on the priorities that we have set. And then also, money still matters, and spending regulations will provide navigational beacons. So at the end of the day, money still matters. We still need to be able to understand what an ending balance means. What does deficit spending mean? Does it mean that what does one-time spending mean? And I think that'll be very critical and key, particularly to staff, because they don't understand what that means in terms of one-time spending. When people see a lump of money, they think that can go on forever and ever, and I think this is the perfect opportunity to start explaining and defining those terms. So our next update is to bring a final budget and LCAP calendar to the next scheduled board meeting. That's the regular one, not the special ones. But to provide information.
When you say a final budget there, is that the budget to implement?
The budget, I'm a budget advisory council. Sorry. When it's to bring a final budget and LCAP council, I'm in budget advisory council because we don't have a calendar for that right now.
To the next regularly scheduled budget advisory council.
So to bring to this meeting, the next regular, because there's a few special meetings, right? So the next one that's the regular meeting, bringing back the LCAP calendar and the BAC calendar. So sorry if I didn't put BAC.
I see.
That's what I meant.
I see.
It was a budget advisory committee.
Okay.
So because I think having those, it'll also, as a board member, when people are asking you questions, the more dates that you have that are final, you can say, here are the dates, attend this meeting. And then you have a menu. If you like small groups, attend this meeting. If you want to be in a large forum, attend this meeting. If you want to learn specifically about the budget, attend this meeting. If you want more information about a certain plan, attend this meeting. So in order for you all to direct that, when you have dates that are at least to the best of our ability established, it gives you an opportunity to communicate that.
You had dates in the last version. We had
weeks. We had week of.
Okay.
So we had in the last version, we had like the week of January 6th through whatever, the week of. So our goal is to
with the May revise.
Exactly.
Which
was
good.
So it all aligned. What we had last time was a draft, and it was the week of. So if we can have established dates, it will help you all.
I agree.
Okay.
That'd be great.
To provide information with regards to all district plans in a scope and sequence format. So in this case, the LCAP is not only do you have to write it in user-friendly language, so none of the educational jargon should be included in LCAP. And it should, while you want to align the plans, we know there's a capacity and bandwidth issue in our tiny district. So the LCAP is to give an opportunity to actually have something that is different. It shouldn't duplicate the plans that we already have. It's supposed to align the plans that we have. So I think in terms of the next update, I just want to give you all information in terms of all the plans that we already have, what those purposes are, what we're supposed to do, because if you have 10 plans, eventually you want them to align in some manner, and they will overlap. And so where are the places where you see the increased services or you see new services versus one plan that may focus on a specific group of students? The goal is to give an update. We'll always give an update to stakeholder engagement in the process. And then if there are other next steps, I would want to entertain those and hear those as well. But before I hear you all, the other thing is I want to emphasize is that I believe that this, and anyone can add, this process is a parallel process with the budget in terms of developing the 14-15 budget, correct? So when we see sometimes that interim budgets, I think as was described before, you're not going to see new services because we're still referring to this year. And while new monies may come in, we're not touching those monies until we get the input. So maybe we need an item to say how much money will be spent there, but because we don't necessarily know, the concentration is to provide services for students, but it's still flexible. That's the whole goal, is that the monies are flexible. So because they're flexible, we want to hear what the stakeholders are, and our goal is to do a parallel process. So the more information we give you every time in terms of what we heard from meetings, what we heard from parents, what we heard from staff, it'll help you be more informed versus trying to understand and process the information at the end of in May or in June. So are there other next steps that you all are thinking about in terms of some information that you all may want to hear or are curious about?
So I'm not sure.
Which is the next one, board role input?
Yeah, not sure. I caught your comment about the interim budgets and the budgets that's in process, but again, as I said with Mr. Bonet, it does appear that we're going to have to articulate this first year LCAP, not just what we're doing in 14-15, but in a more summary but justifiable fashion what we did in 13-14.
Yeah, so I think with 13-14 it will describe what we currently are doing. I think in 13-14, when you hear the updates and the feedback, it'll start to develop the story of what we want to do, either more services or how we want to serve our students differently. And so with the next presentation, you'll hear a little bit about that in terms of a framework and where some of the areas that you've heard teachers come to the mic before during public comments or public meetings, or areas that we're thinking that we do need to increase services, or we need to have different types of services to represent students, our you say unduplicated students?
Mm-hmm.
Our unduplicated students.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
it might
have done some things that are clearly new this year so far. It's just, like you said, it's building upon the right, not so much the story, but, the story, since that's what we used before. But
Well, and again, we've heard requests for new services, new PE services, new art, music, and computer. We've heard all of those for this year. And in fact, depending on what Mr. Bonet can show us and we can justify, it may be that we may need to spend a little more on new services for 13-14 to be able to justify how we increased or improved things based on our LCFF money in 13-14.
yeah, and I think once you start to understand the plans, see the alignment of the plans, understand the framework, it'll also give you information versus to determine whether it's a service that is a Band-Aid service or is a service that will give you high leverage to actually get the outcomes that you want in student performance. So the next one is the response to instruction.
I had another.
You have any questions?
Yeah, I did.
You went back to back.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
it's almost midnight.
And
That's right. Okay, so any questions, comments, discussion for this?
I would like to get out to the Budget Advisory Committee and the school site councils and the Parent Advisory Council a current school level budget as part of having this conversation about our LCAP, because our LCAPs, we're going to have to identify what we're doing a district as a whole, but also what are our goals and actions and expenditures at the school level, and how we're ultimately how we're increasing improving services and meeting our 8 priority areas through our specific actions at the school. So can we, Mr. Bonet, do we keep that, can we catch you before you head home? I know, okay. can we produce a school-level budget now? And do we budget or code our expenditures by location? And if we do, then we should be able to print that out pretty easily.
So while he's walking up, thinking about it, I'll give you my
Okay.
user-friendly answer. When you look at the budgets, they're not user-friendly. And so what I think, when you do the needs assessment and you talk, and so in each plan, there's always a column that states what's the service and how much it costs. And so I think what we can do is something that's general, and I'm sure, I don't know what Mark will state, but it has to be something that's very general that people can understand. When you start to talk about 1,000s and the 2,000s, it took me a long time to understand that. And that's by me coming to every, board meeting, that's by listening to the CBOs, et cetera. What I want to caution is that when we place a budget in front of someone's face and they see a large number, they don't understand that. So it's just more when I think as we describe the plan and we talk about where the funding comes from or what the funding is and how much is spent on staff versus materials, et cetera, that's definitely possible. I just want to, make sure that we present it in a way that anyone, our students or staff or parents, can understand what that means.
So to answer your question, each school site can print out their own site budgets so they can review what they're currently spending. But as Anna Karita said, that printout isn't user-friendly to the general public. You really have to understand the coding, the resource codes, and how
Object
that
codes, the function codes.
Yes, how all of that goes together and how everything is separated out either by resource code or function code or goal or manager code. So each school site can print their own school's site budget out.
The principal can do that?
The principal can do that. But how they might break that down and show their constituents in a user-friendly manner, like I do with the financial status report. That's not something that gets printed out from the system. There is a financial status report that the system can print out, but I don't present that to you. I present a more user-friendly model of that. And having been on school site councils before, I've seen user-friendly models that principals have taken the escape reports from and then put them into a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet that's more user-friendly. We just can't print it out and place it in. You just can't print it out from the system and give it to somebody or present that information to somebody in a user-friendly manner.
Well, I mean, it's my hope that our parents, we saw one of them tonight from our NEH School Site Council, will become increasingly sophisticated and able to understand some of these budgets, and that we shouldn't, underestimate the ability and sophistication of some of our parents to do this work. So I understand that not everyone is at the same starting point, and you're absolutely right. We need to be able to present information in a user-friendly,
I think part of it,
helpful way.
Part of it is the scaffolding, very similar to what was done with the COC. I mean, before we started giving them those detailed budget reports, we sat with them for about 3 months and created a set of user-friendly, just to use that word, formats and reports that Mark now prepares for them. And so those reports accompany the detail report that is underneath it. So there is a way to do both and, because I think both of them are important. But, by and large, depending on the member on the committee, some members are more interested, and I don't know if it's sophisticated, but they're just more interested in that detail, and then others are not. And they just want to ensure that the monies and the categories particularly related to the bond, are being spent properly. strategy. And there may be parents in that same boat. They just want to understand what the priority areas are, what the amounts are, and have the conversations in that way.
Yeah. So let me, I guess, suggest we proceed this way. I'd like to see some of the school level budget information just for myself, and I think I can understand the information and not have you try to make it user friendly for me. Just print out what we got. Do we have Escape 16 or Escape? Is that what we use?
We have Escape,
Yeah.
and I can print them out, PDF them, and
Yeah.
email them to you.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. But then I think I'd like us to give some thought to what we should be presenting, in January and February at these community forums at the school level to explain this is what we're spending on staff, and this is, how are you going to have this conversation?
So this is what I've done before.
Yeah.
So my experience with this
Yeah.
is that I take the budget and I break it down in terms of what they need to know. So not necessarily hiding anything, but I make sure that if these are the funds that we're talking about, then this is what our current funds, and again, it comes from a plan. When you do a needs assessment and you talk about what the needs are, you have to put money to it. So a lot of times you'll see a plan that'll have what the activity is or what the topic is and how much does it cost. To me, that's the best way to actually tell the story versus just giving them a paper with a lot of numbers on it. Because then you don't have a guideline to have the discussion and what is your outcome. So even if I gave them, when you give a budget, what is the outcome? What's the purpose of the conversation? What's the methodology that you're using in order to move to the next step? So it all depends on what the group is, what your methodology is, because the budget is data. That's all it is. It's just data, and how do you present the data to that specific group? So how I would present data to students is very different because I'm scaffolding for them. It's very different than I would maybe to a school site council, particularly one who has been together for 2 or 3 years, versus one who starts off, versus what I would do in terms of community forum. So no, I think we're very aware of that. Again, it's the same thing when Mark even presents to the teachers. He doesn't come with a budget. He starts off with something that's very broad, narrow, and he scaffolds the information for teachers so they can understand where the pockets of monies are or fundings are.
Yeah, well, I guess what's different about this is now we're not just talking about categoricals and pockets of money. It's like we're talking about the whole big pot of money.
It is, and it doesn't matter.
And we're talking about, and we've got, you're right, everything you said is right, and the framework is largely spelled out for us in the 8 state priorities. This is what we got to meet,
Right.
priorities in these areas. What are they? What are our needs in order to be able to get where we want to get to the goals we're setting? And what are we going to do to get there?
So some of the difficulty with reading these budgets is you have teachers that are funded at one school site by
Multiple pots.
multiple general fund unrestricted pots. Class size reduction teachers, they get funded two different resource codes out of parcel tax, and then they're split up in all those different option areas, whether it's art, music, lower class size, and the like. You have special ed, you have maybe a maintenance budget, then you have site administration, all at one site, and it can be very cumbersome to try to digest. But you'll see that when I send you the copies.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm hearing staff say, I think they're cognizant of having to present data via budget, some type of budget, to the whatever focus group they'll be presenting to. And I do hear you say you're trying to keep it simple, where folks can understand it. So for me, I think that's good. But as long as somehow we can present it, whereas it's at least showing the categories of the major categories in which schools funding, school spending is expended on, and what that looks like. I think, that's doing what needs to be done, versus, bringing a general ledger to a meeting and having individuals look at a general ledger. I think that would be very difficult for someone who is not used to reading a financial report to understand. So I think the main thing that I'm hearing from Member Adfeld is just, make sure that the community is able to review what the revenue and expenditures of the district looks like, so they can make a very informed advice or to staff based on what they feel the district needs. And I think as long as you can give them a budget that shows them the high level summary of those funds and those expenditures, then I think you all should be able to take it from there.
Yeah, I think what he's referring to, well, I'm not putting words in your mouth. He's referring to the what, and all I'm doing is shedding light on the how.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'm saying, I think part of having the conversation is starting with the baseline. Where are we at now? What are we spending our funds on now? And maybe the discussion with the community will be, we don't want to do that. We want to stop that, but we want to move to this. But it's sort of, we do need to somehow give them the picture of what the baseline is of where we're starting from.
And that's an assessment. That's all it is. An assessment is a baseline. Where are we currently? Because if we know where we want to go, we have.
But I'm talking about a baseline in terms of the services and expenditures, as well as, and we also have to do the baseline of sort of the priorities, right? Academic.
That's a needs assessment. So that's a needs assessment.
Yeah.
So the assessment. So the difference between just a basic assessment versus a needs assessment is the assessment states where are we currently, where are we right now, where do we need to go. So where we need to go is the needs assessment. So you talk about the needs of the school, and then how much does it cost? In terms of our current reality, do we have the money? Is there a give and take? So what you want to present is a comprehensive picture in terms of where we currently are. How much money do we have, and what does that funding support?
Right.
And then when you know that, you have a needs assessment. And so and this is where the methodology of a cycle of inquiry. When you start off with data, which is our baseline data, you then talk about what we may want. Then you go and gather more data, you set a goal, and you see if you can meet that goal. And that's really what the how is.
Also, I hear you say you're going to be coming back to the board with regular updates, and maybe one of those updates should just be showing the board a template of what you will be presenting in a budget format to the community.
That's fine.
Well, I was just going to say, even at midnight, I have some excitement because I think it is really important that parents and all community members really understand the struggle, the balance of trying to do a lot with a little. So I think that's the refreshing aspect of this, and I know that at each board meeting, primarily we get a request or a concern is brought forward, and I think it is going to be valuable experience for this community to understand why the parcel tax is so valuable and is so necessary, but especially why it is important that throughout all the various changes that we have to stay focused to make sure the commitments we've made to improving education in this community is held. I mean, we can't falter there. So I think it's this will be a new adventure for sure, definitely for staff as I look at your weary faces at midnight. But I think the gain will be really great. A more informed public is what this is doing for us, and absolutely in terms of establishing priorities. So I'm looking forward to the end result.
I just want you all to know that we hear you and we understand what you're asking for.
Excellent. Mr. Bonet, I have one more. One more request, and you almost don't have to say anything. But I guess I'd like you to.
Didn't know he could dance.
Give some thought to how we should be changing our chart of accounts in light of LCFF and how we track money. And, I know some of these conversations are going on at the state too, but,
That's a good point.
right now the state has a resource code that's 0000 for LCFF monies, which mixes with other things that are 000, and it doesn't distinguish between what's base, what's supplemental, what's concentration. And on the other end, I think we should have goal codes that are unduplicated generally, and EL and low income and foster youth specifically.
All those are part of the state, the SACS coding.
Right.
Standardized accounting, I can't remember the name of the acronyms at this time of
System.
the night.
There it is.
But-
County code system, I think it is.
But it's it's all prescribed by the state. So the funds numbers are prescribed by the state, resources are prescribed by the state, goal, function, object code, sites we can designate. There are the options that we can designate. There are about 3 areas that we can self-designate. So we will have to look at those new designations that we can use to better track some of these things that we are going to need to track. I'm sure the state is grappling with the same problem and trying to figure out how they're going to do that in the current account code structure. But we have some options locally. We just have to change. We just have to make some major changes with regard to how we're using the option code. And right now, we're using the option code to identify a lot of the parcel tax areas. That's basically what that option code is being used for right now.
Is that the goal or the DDF?
Well, it's been used as a goal, but it's really the option code numbers that are being used to identify either music, science, lower class size.
The option code. What? How
The
many
very
digits?
last 3 digits.
That's the DDF. Okay, I'm thinking
of the
DDF.
account code
Right, the
structure.
DDF. Okay.
And you may call them something else
Right,
in
right.
Berkeley.
But I got you.
Because each district is allowed to use that and identify it for whatever their needs might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I part of it is the state's figuring it out. Part of it is they're just going to allow districts flexibility on how they want to track stuff. So I think we might have some more flexibility if we want to designate resource codes or break down our resource codes in a certain way, or add some functionality that the state's not going to mandate, but that we might want.
And Mr. or Member DeWin knows this, that there are certain resource codes that go with certain function codes that go with certain goal codes. You just can't start intermingling these because the system will not accept it.
Right. That's why, as you say, the option code is probably at this time the best code to track at this time.
All right.
All right.
All right.
LCAP is to bed.
Before you,
Midnight.
Trustee Dice,
Oh,
before we shift to the RTI presentation, so you just stay right there, Ms. Allen, we do need to ask if there's any public comment on the last one item.
I will formally ask Ryan.
Thank you.
Do you have any public comments related to this?
Thank you.
Or Brandon? You good to go? All right. We'll move on to